I can't remember who called me a boomer at some point. I feel like it was, I don't know what it was, but it makes me laugh so hard.
Well, as someone who's met you, and we are live, Karl, by the way, uh, sort of set a trap for you there. Uh,
Oh my god,
I'm
that's
glad you didn't
hilarious.
respond to that question by answering with your full social security number, as
Yes,
you are
yes,
wont to do.
yes.
But as someone who's met you, I just want to say it's remarkable how well you're able to get around in your Walmart mobility scooter. It's you really.
I remember didn't you tell me that your wife said he seemed like such a normal elderly person?
That's pretty much what she said. Yeah, maybe not a direct quote, but yeah, more or less.
Oh, hilarious.
Well, how have you been, Karl?
I've been doing well. I love this time of year. It I have a lot of family birthdays, and then Thanksgiving is wonderful. Getting together with family, and I love Christmas. I love non-secular Christmas. I'm not saying I eschew putting up a beautiful Christmas tree and decorations and everything. Of course, we maintain those trappings, but my loathing for quote unquote Christmas music, where there's a lot of coincidences in the removing Christ from Christmas stuff. I think a lot of the like Baptists and other schismatics go way too far in terms of being like we shouldn't celebrate holidays. That's that level of Puritanism is goofy, and it does everyone a disservice, I think, ultimately, because you need to maintain like the cultural element of Christianity is important, and you need to do what you can in a secular world. So, but anyway, yes, that's my long rambling way of saying I am very happy with that. I've also been on a tear with podcasting and stuff, not just with you on a regular basis, which I've enjoyed a lot, but I was on the Inquisition recently, which was great. I did a couple shows with Will Tanner, my shortest delivery on the subject of the Spanish Civil War to date, other than the 1 hour that we did that one time. And I'm going to be on Myth of the 20th Century, which I'm stoked for because I've been a huge fan of theirs for years and years. So,
Well, yeah, dude, I'm looking forward to that. The ethnic stuff is kind of interesting because I've mentioned before my wife's family is ethnically Swedish, which means my entire house has been taken over with like tiny. Oh, I forgot to turn my camera on. We were doing audio stuff before, that's why I was off. But my entire house has been taken over with like Yule rams and Dala horses, right? These
oh
little
yeah, of
painted
course, yeah.
wooden figurines, which are it's nice and cheery, but they're also everywhere. And it's incredibly easy to send a like 2-inch tall wooden 100 years old in some family heirloom just like skittering across the floor,
Yes,
just bouncing off of everything. So
yeah.
I've been walking around my house like I'm checking for booby traps because on every available surface there is something tiny, fragile, and irreplaceable to celebrate the season. So it could be worse, I guess.
It's interesting that you mentioned the Scandi traditions because uh, I as people might know from my pseudonym, I am a West Coast mutt in that my genetic heritage. Now, don't dox me or anything, but my genetic heritage is essentially like foundational American Anglo, right? There is an Irishman in there, so you got one of those in the woodpile. But uh, anyway, point being, there's that, and then this infusion of like Germans and Norwegians and some others tossed in there. I consider the Scots Irish to be foundational Anglos, so they could get mad at me.
Well, I appreciate you extending extending that charity to
Well,
us.
that's my on one side of my family is from Appalachia, so they basically won the Revolutionary War and then settled in West Virginia and Ohio and stayed there for 200 years. So
I see someone asking about lutefisk, which is one I can neither pronounce nor stomach. I have eaten it before. It's a bit grim. I'm going to be
Yeah,
honest.
yeah.
The old joke is that the English conquered the world rather than eat their own women's cooking, and I think there's a similar argument to be made about why uh, you Scandies, right, got in boats and decided to go steal stuff from places with actual food.
When
Uh,
you live like literally where ice is floating in the water for like 9 months out of the year, uh, preserved fish being a huge part of your diet, and pre-refrigeration, mountain rapists. That's a good way to put it. Um, yeah, it's pretty great. I'm actually not 13% Salish. I am 0% Native American. Thank you.
the
A20s, A20s, baby.
I can confirm actually. The the from what I understand, a lot of ethnic food in the U.S. that comes from Europe is sort of trapped in amber. I've met a number of people who currently live in Sweden or Norway, and when I ask them about this, they're always like, "Well, why do they eat like old people?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
nobody has eaten that food in 100 years." And the answer is, "Well, that's when they got here,
That's when they
right?
got here.
100 years ago."
That's when they got here.
Uh, Actually, Sex Freakman, a solid source for any opinion. Pre-refrigeration, if anything, they've always had refrigeration. That is a valid point, Mr. Freakman.
To a degree.
Uh, yeah, I guess that you run into the problem. Like I think the Mongolians, or maybe it's the uh, Kyrgyzstanis. What's the correct form of that word? They do a lot with kind of leaving meat out to freeze, and then boiling it. But it seems a bit grim. I wouldn't recommend that to anyone. But point is, I have had more modern Nordic food, and it's quite good. Like there's one of the guys in the Virginia OGC is Swedish, and he worked as a professional chef. And so when he makes pickled herring, it's delicious.
Yeah,
Like it's
yes.
incredible. But when it comes out of a can and is prepared by someone who is alive, during the Hoover administration, it's not quite as tasty.
No, no, it's interesting how I did a bit of a dive because I have friends who live in the culinary world. When I needed to learn how to prepare food that wasn't just sludge, I took some time to read about it, and what I learned was that this elevated French cooking that is so foundational to the Western culinary tradition, and really is like the root of professional chefs everywhere. What they did was they took simple foods and they elevated them by preparing them in a way that just wasn't gruel and stuff. They would say, let's take these foods which are fundamentally sound, and let's use modern equipment to produce an elevated version of it. And you see that uh all around the world, where that's a step that people have to do. Because like if you were to go to Panama, for example, right now, uh you'll be eating some nice food in some nicer restaurants that's a version of the slop bowl, that where they're just throwing chickens in and you're picking bones out of your teeth, like just right down the road in a hovel. So when you go around the world, there's these really simple versions, and some traditions take more care in tidying up their food than others. Let's just say that. Let's be charitable and say that there's probably wonderful food all around the world, but a lot of times, you're choking on bones, or you're just eating something that was boiled for a really long time, and it's awful. Like think of the mayor of Minneapolis.
Just choking down some sort of
It's like food aid.
unidentifiable sludge.
It's UN food aid with a bunch of sugar on it, and it's just boiled over a fire and probably like a captive slave's bones, and it's like it's not exactly tasty. The
Well,
the
I'm
quality
going
of
to
the
ask you.
ingredients are everything.
Speaking of that, actually, Carl, I'm going to ask you a question that I know you have strong opinions on. What are your favorite MREs?
I'm so old that MREs were new when I like was of the age to get into like military food. My dad would complain about sea rats, and they weren't that bad if they were of certain sources. So I grew up eating like sea rats from the army surplus store, and the first MRE I ever had was when a friend of mine came back from the military and gave it to me. And I think I had one of the spaghetti dishes, but with
Not bad. Like not horrible.
it's not bad. The Tabasco is great. The problem with MREs is the bowel thing, and it's like it makes sense in field conditions that you don't want people to have like normal let's say normal digestive cycles. Like that makes perfect sense, but it makes for a miserable experience when you're just going about your life.
So here's what I'll say, listener. Right now, for just contract reasons, MREs are extraordinarily cheap.
Yeah.
Like even on Amazon, right? You can buy, in date cases of MREs for like $60.
Yeah.
Highly recommend you do that just because, it's portable. You can stick it in the basement forever. And if you need it, you know, it's food. The food you will find in there is highly variable. There's some stuff that you eat it and you're like, okay, like if I got that at a Chili's, I wouldn't be mad. It's not like gourmet cooking, but like it's pretty good. There are other things like the cheesy potatoes, which are cruel and unusual punishment.
Yes,
Like
yes.
they should not be fed to any human being, period.
The,
So
the
your
British
results may
ones are
vary.
pretty good. The British ones are pretty good. That's one of the neat things in the modern world is that you can have MREs from around the world. The Korean ones are actually really good too. I,
Honestly, the halal ones also pretty good. They have like a different
Interesting.
contractor system,
Yeah.
at least as far as I understand it. So, the halal or the kosher meals, and incidentally enough, apparently this applies to prison culture as well, tend to be higher quality. Take what you will from that. But point is, you can find a lot of these for pretty cheap. And I think like any man, uh, of a certain age interested in any form of right-wing politics, you're a little bit of a doomsday prepper, right? A slight
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
And so, why not? It's a good stocking stuffer, a crate full of MREs.
What I'll say to that end is those are super handy. The best way to actually do your deep storage is to leverage the Mormon. I forget the terminology that they use for their little subversive bases. I say that with a smile, where they do their preps, because per their religion they're required to have a certain amount of food stockpiled. Like it's more than a year generally, and they have really good plans. There's really good plans online for this, and if you have facilities to actually cook, you have a lot more variables available to you in terms of like what you can store and how to do it. So there's this whole scale. Like you don't want to have the 55-gallon drum of rice. What you want to do is you want a 55-gallon drum of rice, and then you want a container with smaller ones so that you can actually use them and cycle them. And the so that gets really, you can get super economical by doing the actual work, by working with rice and flour and stuff. I mean, I make my own bread a lot of the time. I don't do that for all the bread that we eat, but I like to make a loaf. And I have a sourdough starter that's been hanging out for a couple years, and it's really good. That's a good way to do it too. But the MREs are handy. You throw it in a bag. It's not that bad to eat every once in a while. It's fine when you're hiking. The backpacking foods that you buy in like an REI or something like that tend to suck. They don't have nearly enough calories. They do not have nearly enough calories. MREs are calorie dense. So that's a good one. The other one I'll point out, humanitarian daily rations are something that you can see listed as an MRE. They suck. Like it's horrible. It's like vegetable based, and yeah, there's
Yes,
something
it's
there.
just vegetable base. And you're like, well,
Yes.
vegetable based what? And the answer is calories.
It's just
Uh,
calories.
uh, are you one of the, so one of the, we were not like we had a plan to talk about. This is not what I thought we'd be talking about. One of the other problems you get with MREs is that they're kind of overstuffed. Like there's too
Yeah.
much stuff in there. Like there's always like, condiments and other things that you don't need. Like a lot of it's like filler too. Like
Yeah.
I don't particularly enjoy the like crackers with fruit spread, like some
No.
people do, but it's like, okay, it's there's not a lot of energy there. Uh, so if you're actually thinking about like carrying them on a hike or a hunt or something, you kind of gut it and you take like the main course, maybe one or two other things, and it packs way down. And also, this is not a paid ad, although, geez, I wish they would pay me because I've spent an ungodly amount of money at their store. Venture Surplus will
Mm.
sell you in bulk, like different parts of an MRE. So if all you want is the entree and the cooking element, you can go there and buy it. And it's okay, it's probably about the same cost as the full thing, but like, how much do you care about having a crate full of like single use plastic forks and knives, right? Like that's basically wasted space. So there are options if you don't need the whole thing.
Very interesting. That yeah, because that's what you do end up doing is you rip it apart, and again, it's vacuum packed, so the stuff goes everywhere. You're like, how did they fit that much stuff into this little container? And then you just take the meal. The hexamine tablets are really handy though for heating water and stuff. Having a stove for that. I'm a nerd, so I lean towards my favorite is always using actual fire, but the problem these days is that you know, camping in the summer, there's burn bans everywhere all the time. And so I do a lot more with like a white gas stove, like for backpacking that all the time. I do a fair amount of backpacking with my son in overnighters way up in the mountains. But so this is something near and dear to my heart because like you need to have enough calories. The other thing that I'll say is I am a big fan of like minute rice, but it doesn't take that much more fuel to cook conventional white rice, which is way cheaper. And you can prepare your own little, freeze dried stews and stuff like that by just combining a variety of things and having like real substantial meals. If you carry a 44 special loaded with hard cast lead bullets, like not as scared of mountain lions and bears, but that's just me. But anyway, yeah, that gives you a lot of options. And having white rice, like something that's like fairly clean after you've been up there for 3 days, is like a palate cleanser for something, after eating all these like backpacking meals with tons of sodium and everything is actually very refreshing. So I'll just say that.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing you bring up, the kind of as someone who's not nearly as into the kind of like hiking gear, we'll put it that way, as other things. I always get very annoyed going into any sort of outdoor store. Uh just because one, it's like I kind of hate the like I think the term for it, I'm stealing this from my wife, is like gorp fashion. The like a
Mm,
million bright colors of like
yeah.
some like PUFA filled material. And then it's like everything is incredibly expensive.
Yes.
And as a cheapskate, always been a big fan of military surplus for
Yeah. Oh
exactly that
yeah. Yeah.
reason.
Yeah.
Is it's like you could generally get something that is, to quote an off-used phrase, just as good, maybe with a link there. It is something more expensive. And it's just like, is it really, just as nice as a $500 rain shell from REI? No, it is not. But it also isn't $500. And that has a sort of quality all its own.
Sorry. Took a bite.
Oh, not at all, man. The yeah, I have been meaning to get more into backpacking. It's just, I bought a house and I haven't had much free time. But I am not at all. But are you friends with any kind of like, you know, long distance runners or people like that?
Yeah, I've done a bit of that myself.
I think these people are psychopaths, like genuinely.
I
Like
agree
obviously,
completely.
running a marathon is impressive. I know some guys who are into like the Ironman circuit doing that whole thing, which again is, cool and impressive. But at a certain point, it just seems like masochism. right? Like a
It
deliberate
is.
desire
It
to
is.
hurt yourself.
Yeah.
And dude, this weekend, and I did sign up for it. Like I'm happy to do it. A friend of mine I don't see much is running a 50-mile overnight race. Like it
Yeah.
starts at midnight,
Those are
yeah,
insane,
up
dude.
up and down a mountain. And so I've agreed to drive him out to the start line and just kind
Mm.
of leave him there. Uh, and you know, he's in his mid 40s now. He's been doing it for the past 20 years. Like on one hand, I'm like, that's incredibly impressive. But also, why are you doing that? Like, did someone hurt you? You know, are you looking to punish
You know,
yourself or something?
yeah, part of it is and this is my theory. There's this mentality it seems to be very American, but I think it could also just be very male that if you want to stay in shape, you have to do something competitive. When it's like you could also just go for a run or go for a hike. And what I've done is I've brought my mileage way down, because the problem is you get to a point where you're like, I'm not going to be able to lift nearly as much, because of the time that you have to focus, as well as your training orientation. You're faster the less weight you're carrying. I want to be able to not die when someone tries to beat me to death. And so, if you're a long distance runner, like there's very few guys that can maintain much of an overall physique who are running like super long distances. So for me, I transitioned into the shorter distances, and then now I'm running tonight. I'll run about 4 miles tonight regardless of the weather, to a destination, and then my wife will be there, and I'll be able to do a change of clothes, have a short workout, hang out in the sauna, and then go have a drink. Very healthy. I do want to say, for the record, Machiavelli sucks to go asks 357 is my biggest handgun, so that isn't enough. Go to Buffalo Bore Ammunition and get a hard cast lead 357 load. And then the reason you have that cylinder with more than one hole in it is that you shoot more than once when there's a bear. They have records from like Alaskan fishing guides who've killed bears with 9mm loaded with their loads, because again, you have a magazine, and so you shoot more than once. The one shot stop thing doesn't really do much for you. You use the magazine. So yeah, you're fine with the 357, I think. I mean, it'd be better to have like a 10mm or a 44 Magnum, theoretically, but I think you're probably okay. Just aim.
Well, I'm a big fan of rifle length 357 for deer hunting. I've
Yeah.
shown you my Retardo Henry that I've
Yeah.
used to great effect. And Buffalo Bore, again, they have a 158 jacketed hollow point that will do 2,200 feet per second out
Yeah.
of a 16-inch barrel,
Yeah.
which is, it's not going to set the world on fire, but that's impressive for a handgun round. Right?
And for bears, you don't want a hollow point. You want as much penetration as possible. Like for deer and stuff, yeah, absolutely. Because that does the whole energy transfer, more, expansion damage. But yes, I did say load. You do want a solid flat nose lead, because you want it to punch as deeply as possible, and to just like make sweet love to the internals of that bear.
Speaking of terminal ballistics, how's that for a transition? You wrote a short story recently that was pretty good.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so you and I have talked about this before. I like to tell a story that's as close to a polemic as possible without just being a polemic, right? And so essentially the concept, and it's out on my Substack, karldahl.substack.com, and it is titled Modernisme with a Splash of Red, because it takes place in Barcelona in the La Thample neighborhood, which is the classic Barcelonian like 6-story super block square grid with beautiful modernist architecture. And the concept is essentially, this is a good universal weapon that would take care of about 90%, 70 to 90% of needs in a, let's say, European, I want to use my words carefully here, resistance movement type of use. And so the idea is a platform that is essentially a elaboration on a 9mm handgun as a core platform. And so you can manufacture, with the only difference being frame and a few other pieces, basically like a PDW that you can use for urban sniping, as well as a handgun iteration. So because I think one of the things that people do in like gun nerd world is they're like, well, there's the Liberator from World War II, and it's a stamped sheet metal 45 ACP that fires one round and then takes about a minute to reload, and it's loud. And so, yeah, you got this German or Japanese soldiers' equipment, and now everyone knows where you are. And so, like, in the improvised weapons suck. Improvised guns suck. Like, it's better than nothing, but in reality, the right way to do things is to take pains to spend your money in a way that gets the best bang for the buck. And so, like, a real service weapon that ticks the boxes for what you need, which is reduced forensic evidence, a suppressor, reliability with that suppressor on it, and a suppressor of God knows what quality, and having various options for buildings out. And the current state of the art is radically different from like the kind of stuff that you would do in the 80s, for example.
Well, this is sort of an interesting thing. Not like it's going to matter to me personally for much longer, given the impending 1,000-year libtard Reich. But it is kind of interesting, and you've already seen this happen in the realm of suppressors, where once the barrier to entry for the civilian market came down, due to inflation and also changing to how that paperwork needed to be done, you had this explosion of innovation.
Yeah.
Right. You had this explosion of technology that had basically lain dormant for 70 years, plus or minus. And all of a sudden you have all these interesting things happening. And, with the upcoming change where now there is, no additional cost to buying a suppressor or, short barreled rifle, look up the National Firearms Act for those who are not familiar and want to familiarize themselves. I'm curious to see if we will see a similar advancement in the kind of PDW / stocked pistol space, because it seems to me that, and I realize as a 32 aficionado, you'll likely have strong opinions, but yeah, it's interesting that technology again has really sort of lain dormant since the middle of the 20th century.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when you look at the early 20th century, there's all these great weapons around World War I where it's a pistol with a stock option. And the idea being, at the time, a military would have like a bolt action rifle or carbine, and then you'd have a heavy machine gun, and then you would either have a revolver or like a semi-automatic pistol. And they would say, hey, what if we combine the pistol with like a wooden holster stock that would allow people to like shoulder it and like have a relative rapid fire option for within 100 yards. And a lot of times they'd have these crazy gradations on the sites that say they could go to like 600 yards. Yeah, right. But in general, it gives you this capability, and that's precisely the concept behind what I call the modern Liberator, which is that by having an option to have a folding stock in one of the profiles, like, you can take confidently, easily shots out to like 150 yards, no problem. And yeah, is it as good as like a 308 rifle? No. Is it better than a pistol without a stock? Vastly in terms of this. And if you look at a B&T, which is a Swiss manufacturer, they have what they call a USW, the Universal Service Weapon, and it can be like a chassis for like a Glock or something like that. They have a P320 version where you drop the little fire control unit into this,
and then it goes off, I believe.
Yeah, and then it blows your dick off, which I had to make a joke about in the story. It has a pretty good trigger for a striker fired gun that won't blow your dick off. But and it also
something that never needed to be clarified until the shall we say the firearms miracle of one Ron Cohen.
But yeah, Ron Cohen, he really hits his Ibadan numbers every quarter. My goodness. Yeah, the C96, one of my favorite weapons. And that is a prime example of that era. And Sean Weiland, yes, exactly. Inexpensive 3D printed P90 in pistol form, like something like that. But in my story, it's 9mm because that's universal around the world, right? And then the idea is you use like a Walther, also Beretta used it, locking block mechanism, which is, and I have an article about this on my Substack, but it is an incredibly robust operating system for having a suppressor mounted. Ian McCollum lied recently. He misspoke where he said that having a Nielsen device, which is that little spring piston system that goes on the back of a suppressor, that like a Browning tilting barrel mechanism needs to ensure reliability. Basically, those pistols couldn't run with a suppressor until very recently, when you could have like a 4-ounce, titanium suppressor or something like that. They wouldn't run consistently with that, but the Berettas and Walthers could. And so all through the 20th century, you would see like state of the art at the time suppressors, which were big, right, and heavy, would run fine on Walthers and Beretta M9s, M1951s, etc. And they would not run on like a Browning High Power or a Colt 1911 or a Glock or something like that. And again, like as you modernize, as the metallurgy becomes a thing, and you can get these very tiny, lightweight suppressors, there's an exchange that takes place. Like efficiency is like volume and complexity of the baffles and so on and so forth, which typically was required weight, but now you have like sintered metal manufacturing, additive manufacturing, so you can have these extremely lightweight or like robotically welded things from titanium and what have you, to where you have a really robust can that doesn't weigh very much. Well, you might be in a situation where that's kind of an afterthought, or you have some fabrication limitations. So the most robust operating system possible is your best bet. The other thing that you get with that system is that you can essentially have a mechanism that blocks the locking block so that the gun won't cycle and it will retain the spent case, which makes it a quieter shot, as well as retaining forensic evidence. In this theoretical fictional story in Europe, not me, not in America. I follow all laws closely. But then what that does is it retains the forensic evidence. It has a much quieter shot because of, it's a suppressor. The action isn't opening up and letting that sound out, which does make a difference. It seems irrelevant, but it does make a difference. That's the basic concept.
It's sort of an interesting one, because like you said, there is this kind of fantasy of the folded sheet metal submachine gun or something like that. And this is actually a problem you see as well with, HKs or even like, HK style roller delayed guns, where they were manufactured in a way that made a ton of sense when they were designed, right? If you are the Soviet Union, having a whole town that exists exclusively on a rail line to make, these folded metal monstrosities makes a ton of sense. But in the US, where we don't have that sort of infrastructure, or, if you're a, partisan, one might say, that is no longer practical if you can't count on direct military aid from, the communist bloc. And so, the Liberator is sort of something similar, right? Where it's folded sheet metal, which is very affordable to do once you have a giant facility where you can fold sheet metal.
Yeah.
But if you don't, all of a sudden it's incredibly expensive to replicate. Weirdly, you see that anytime some sort of replica firearm comes out, and people will get very upset. They're like, oh, why does this cost $5,000? And it's like, well, because they basically had to make an entire factory to sell 300 of them to weirdos.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't like you can just set up a CNC machine, get a forged aluminum blank from one of a couple foundries and then just hit go. It's a very difficult thing to do. And I thought it was an interesting piece for that, as well as for kind of like the operation element. It sort of reminded me of, have you ever seen, I think it's GIGN, all right, the French counterterrorism sort of hybrid, military police force that still this day uses, 357 revolvers.
MR73, baby.
Yeah, and have that sniper variant, right,
yes.
with a bipod fitted on it. And the argument for it is kind of interesting, where it was basically like, well, in an urban setting, sniping isn't this like, calculate the Coriolis effect, 1,600 yard shot, licking your finger, sticking it in the wind. It is an accurate shot, but it's like 20 yards. Right?
Yeah,
it's from like one rooftop to another. And so over that distance, like a particularly accurate pistol with a bipod is, acceptable. They seem to have had good success with it. Now, they are French, and so they do things in an odd way. And I don't see many people trying to copy them. Like, what's the old joke? The French copy nobody and nobody copies the French, But that's what it sort of had me thinking of as well.
Yeah, and that's exactly. So like in the story, a Barcelonese super block is essentially, you have a city block, and then you have buildings ringing the city block, and then you have a large courtyard in the middle, and basically rooftop to balcony, across the greatest extent of it, it's no more than like 60 meters, 70 meters. And so, and that's pretty consistent. And so, I mean, a 50 meter shot, 50 yard shot is with a PCC, a 9mm PCC, with the stock extended and everything, braced against a balcony, handguard or something like that. Like, that's not a hard shot. That's with an optic. Like, that's incredibly easy. And so that's the idea.
Karl Dahl, I have been reliably informed that a 140 yard shot with a scoped 30-06 rifle is so difficult that only a trained Israeli assassin can do it. So I don't know if I believe you.
Yes. Also, I think the GIGN were involved in that one too, according to certain grifters. It's incredible.
I mean, honestly, I'll put it this way. I'm not the biggest fan of the Macrons for any number of reasons, but if you did us a favor, all would be forgiven. That's all I'll say. That is a joke, but it would be really funny if you did it. And when I say you did it, Mr. Macron, either Mr. Macron, I mean you personally. Like, I won't be happy until I see, you on the rooftop. That's all I'm going to say. We got a few super chats. Mario, $2. God bless, gentlemen. Thank you very much. And Super Jackhack 2. Dear Jay, you once said that you go guns are miserable wretches. To that, I retort know you. Thank you for finally having a decent guest on for some actual quality content.
You met
well,
Jack.
Yeah, I did. I mean, fair enough, man. I guess you paid me $10 to say it, but no. My main opinion on this, which I will 100% back up, the Yugo Mausers are really nice. The Yugo AKs are miserable. They're ungodly heavy. The quality on them has always been suspect, and you're starting to see more and more of a consensus building around that. But look, the AK is already, relatively speaking, quite heavy. Just is what it is. To make it, for no reason, like 50% thicker. It's not like people are blowing AK frames apart, right? It's not like the thing was rattling itself to death. Why did you do this? You made it ugly, heavy, worse, and it costs more money. To what end? The Yugo's just hideous as far as I'm concerned.
The finishes are beautiful though when they're brand new, and the quality of the wood is shocking. Jack, it's funny because Jack and I fired a pal's 5.56 Yugo AK, and we looked at each other and we were like, "What the hell?" Because it's totally overgassed, but it's an AK, right? Totally overgassed. I swear to you, there was more felt recoil in this because of the mechanism than just about any AK I can think of. Like a 7.62 AK had less felt recoil than this Yugo 5.56 AK. We were astonished by it. And again, it's totally overgassed, yada yada. I mean, it's beautiful, but yeah.
I think we've got him, boys.
Got him. That's hilarious.
So as I sort of joked before, I'm fast approaching an era of not being able to buy anything fun. And so my one purchase, and I actually think that, if you're planning on doing an SBR, it's like the right way to do it. And also it's a funny thing to own. You are talking to a future Draco owner, Karl.
Hell yeah.
So I'm really entering my Wigger arc. I'll get one of the gold spray painted ones off of like Atlantic Firearms and just start, mag jumping out of my Chrysler 300. 64 wounded, 0 killed. You know who did it.
I will say this, like I think I texted you this, of course. You
also sent me, I think, the funniest meme anyone has ever sent me about AKs.
Oh, I don't remember which. Oh, yeah. I think
which we cannot play live.
No, we can't.
But if you're familiar with the stereotype of the gun, you can guess.
Yeah. So, I think I even got that one from Jack. But anyway, I had a Draco at one point, but it was before the arm brace was a thing, and I had 2 little kids, and it was the 8.5-inch barrel variant, which was like the original one. And this is some deep lore that people don't know about, but this is confirmed from a book that was written in the late 90s, or it might have even been the early aughts, that Kalashnikov himself was involved in, that came out of the I think it was Izmash factory, that had the developmental history of like basically every project that Mikhail Kalashnikov worked on. And the Krinkov, right, that everyone knows in the 545, the barrel length in that was figured out in the 60s with experiments on the 7.62 by 39 AK to where the muzzle velocity would drop off enough and the muzzle blast would kick up enough that it became really inefficient. And that was the cutoff point, is 8.5 inches. Anything shorter than that, and it has a lot to do with like the powder and a bunch of other stuff, but anything shorter than 8.5 inches, the muzzle velocity and efficiency of the cartridge just plummets. You also see this with 300 Blackout. It's like a sweet spot for the supersonic loads. So anyway, so the Draco originally had that barrel length, and now they have shorter and shorter ones because people just use them as, they're for spraying the ghetto with bullets. But my plan was to SBR it, and then that I can't remember. I bought it for like $300 at the time because I bought it in like the aughts, and the prices skyrocketed, and so I sold it in like 2016 or 2017 for over $1,000 because I could, and I was like, and again at the time I was like, am I gonna do all this stuff? Like, no, it's not worth it. So I unloaded it because I was like tired of it because they're pretty ghetto. Like the finish on them is quite bad, but if you sit there and lovingly like sand it and do all this stuff and refinish it, but you can also, what I would say, if you want it to actually be useful, if you're not just blinging it out, get an adjustable gas block for it, one with a fixed front sight. I'm trying to think of the company that makes it, but
I know the one you're talking about. My buddy has one. He had one of the closeout Kalashnikov USA AK-103s. They're actually really good guns.
They're really nice.
It's absurd now. It's got like the full Ukraine war like Zenit code.
Yeah, of course.
It weighs like 12 pounds, but it is kind of cool. But they make a like a 12.5-inch Draco.
Yes.
Which is much more practical. And is it an absurd thing to own? Yes, but also it's like SBRs are free now. So it's like, okay, whatever, just do some paperwork. And like all of a sudden, you know, a 12-inch AR or a 12-inch AK, that is a nice thing to have.
Yeah.
You know, like that becomes very handy. The powder is basically already burned, but also you get to say you own a Draco, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm too. If you have an adjustable gas block, it makes a good suppressed weapon.
Well, and that's people bought a full size 30 caliber suppressor as my first can, and then realized I really don't shoot anything that makes sense on. And so now it's like the most ass backwards purchasing ever, which is what gun makes sense to put this suppressor on, which is a horrible way to make financial decisions.
But that's what happens when you do that. Is you're like, if I 30 caliber one, it'll work on my 5.56, and yes, I have this one rifle that I might thread someday, you know. but you don't.
Yeah, well, and it's one of those things as well where it's like I then got a small low back pressure 5.56 suppressor, and that's the only one I use. It's great.
Oh yeah, they're wonderful.
It makes it so pleasant. It gets rid of that, like, I can feel the minor TBI as this like 10-inch AR abomination goes off right next to my head. So yeah, there are advantages to it. It's kind of funny. Have you ever messed with any of the like Bulgarian milled AK stuff?
Yeah, they're really nice, but like you were saying before, they're not exactly lightweight, but they're very nice.
My a buddy of mine, it's actually it's a beautiful gun. It's one of the high-end arsenals with the side folding para stock.
Yes.
And it is a hoss. It's absurd.
Yeah.
And when I first met him, I am very much I prefer, all things being equal, light rifles. I will do a lot to accomplish that end. And he had this like god awful SIG prism scope. It was like 18 ounces. You can look them up. They're in Tarkov, I think. That's really the only notable place they're from. Dude, no joke. It was a 12-pound rifle. It was miserable to actually use. And so I like very gently over the course of like a year was like, hey, you can buy a red dot sight on Amazon that won't break from a company you've heard is 3 pencils. It's great. Yeah. And it does not turn this thing into a giant boat anchor. Because again, like I love, especially like the fall paras, like the side folding wire stocks. They look sick.
Yeah.
They don't really work as stocks, to be honest.
No, they're not great for that. Yeah, exactly.
Thoughts on the Japanese heavy machine gun from World War II? I have none, to be honest.
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
I will. They use the Hotchkiss system. Machiavelli sucks to go. The Japanese settled on the Hotchkiss system. The French used the Hotchkiss, and the Spanish did. And so a lot of the the Spanish world ended up using Hotchkisses, and the Japanese also, as I'm sure They used 7.7, and then they also had a 6.5 cartridge. And yeah, they look kind of wacky. They're obviously from an era, that interwar period, like weapon development, can be kind of strange looking, but you can see where things are going. So they're very innovative, but they look kind of awkward. But they're actually quite good and were highly respected. The funny thing is the Japanese did use the Type 11 in World War II also, but it was pretty obsolete. It was first issued in 1922, and it's an early Hotchkiss design, and they would use these like hopper trays for ammunition. The heavy machine gun was also like that as well, and the Spanish were in the same boat, where they eventually developed the magazine fed one, but they would use these strips. They didn't use like cloth belts. They used these metallic, like almost like a stripper clip, but it would feed through. And the idea was, at the time, they were much cleaner than like cloth based things, and they were, again, yes, they were easy to load. And so this is all this interwar stuff, and a lot of these designs that didn't continue through, but at the time they made sense. There was a lot of like logistical considerations that drove these design selections, and a lot of them could be, like, we could say in retrospect, were a little obsolete, but not that bad.
So I think that is sort of one of the interesting things, is that we're in sort of a period of effectively technological stagnation as regards, realistically, we're all basically using cartridges that are 100 years old.
Yeah.
Actions that are 70 years old, and it's been kind of minor refinements. To that point, I saw a question earlier asking about, 6.5 Creedmoor versus 308. Does it make sense for you? That sort of depends on what you're trying to do. Like for a hunting rifle, I actually think a 6.5 makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
They're really pleasant to shoot. You're not going to be shooting a ton. So the downsides, which are, more expensive ammo and barrel life, they're not going to matter for you. A 6.5 is really pleasant recoiling, which is going to be helpful. It's slightly lighter, which, might be conceivably helpful, but also they're super flat shooting. And assuming you're using just a basic hunting scope with a cross hatch in it, that's going to make your zero more functional effectively. Now, if you're shooting high round count, no, 308, is nice. If you have a accuracy, you're trying to shoot a long range or, tiny little targets, the bullets you need to do that are basically the same price between the two cartridges.
Yeah.
It's just 6.5 is a little flatter shooting. So it's a minor refinement. It's a really nice cartridge. I like shooting it a lot, but for what end? But that's another example, right? Where effectively 308's been around forever. 308 is, let's be honest, just 30-06 short. 30-06, which will instantly vaporize a neck from any distance and could never do anything other than instantly blow someone's head off, as I've been reliably informed on the internet. But it is a minor extension of that same family line, right? Nothing crazy has really come out. And obviously there have been advances in packaging. How do we make this ergonomic? How do we fit the most in the least space? But it's sort of entering this weird era where it's like, let's be honest, the AR-15 or AR-18, right, depending on which nation you are, has basically become like the modern Brown Bess. It's like we've sort of reached a technological plateau. And, until something crazy happens, it's all sort of like, well, what do you want, right? How much money do you have and what are you trying to do? Because, realistically, yeah, sure, nice stuff is nice. And, a better version of something will have measurable benefits. But like, your particular boutique cartridge that is 13% more effective than a 9mm doesn't matter, because everyone in the world uses 9mm with it until there is something meaningfully better.
Agreed, 100%. There's also a comment right after that from Javier. 3D printed scorpions when? Well, you're in luck, Javier. Go to odyssee.com, Odyssey, and search Scorpion 3D, and you will find a couple good designs. There's and they have all the different ways that you can do it. There is a commercial manufacturer who uses a licensed version of a free file that's out there to 3D print Scorpion receivers for the commercial market. You buy a kit online. You can get them with a barrel. You'll probably need to install it, or maybe not. It just depends on who you're buying with the barrel installed. There is a file out there. I think it's on Thingiverse is where I got it. That is it costs like $5 for the STL file, and it's the jig for fitting and pinning a Scorpion barrel into the upper receiver. So you can get an original smooth barrel. Those are really cheap now. They're like $59. They're required for, gun control purposes to sell the parts kit with the barrels removed. You can get a modern threaded barrel version that at very high standards of manufacture for like $80 to $150 depending on who you buy it from. So yes, you can have a 3D printed Scorpion receiver. Yes.
Well, and that's another thing that's been interesting to watch. There are very few YouTube channels that I, really keep up with. But one of the best is a YouTube channel called Super Fast Matt. Right, the guy is an engineer, does extremely complicated and stupid car projects. So, for instance, he sort of made his bones making a motorcycle powered, Honda Roadster. Has a few land speed records, an off-road Viper, all kinds of nonsense. But he's gotten super into 3D printing, and I hadn't really paid attention since I bought a $200 Ender 3 10 years ago. It was kind of a piece of junk. And okay, so obviously, he's using this for a different end, right? Making molds for carbon fiber or whatever. But still, you're like, wait a minute. The quality of 3D printers has gone up so quickly, and the price has gone down. You're like, what? Mm-hmm. This is all of a sudden incredibly achievable, because the old 3D printers used to be super aggravating to set up and, product test. Like I had one that had a frame that was not square and could not be made square. So it never printed anything right because it was off axis. And I think that's sort of an interesting thing that and you see this with 3D or with metal sintering, which you mentioned earlier, which is, commonly referred to as, metal 3D. But again, like the capital requirements have gone down to the point where it's like hobbyists 100% can't do this.
Absolutely.
And if you're a creatively inclined young man willing to figure some stuff out, like you can do a lot. Like even my brother-in-law, right? He has a business where he's, doing basically high-end, custom woodworking stuff. And he has a 3-axis CNC machine that he uses to make molds, to make, molding, all that kind of stuff. And don't get me wrong, it's a big machine. It is industrial and it's expensive, but it's like $3,500. Like, okay, that's a lot of money, but like, we're basically at a point where like a $10,000 loan, which, is not, that's a lot of money, but like, that's not impossible to accrue. You can basically have your own manufacturing set up. Exactly. And that's really neat. Like you can get a lot done with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, Jay, I got an Ender 3 V3 SE. My son and I got it for Christmas last year, and it was like $179. And what I wanted to do was figure out, do I want to do 3D printing and how feasible is it? Because if you're not actually doing it, it just seems like there's this mystique. But yeah, like in the last year, the stuff available commercially has skyrocketed in quality so much that like Bamboo and Prusa have machines, and then there's some knockoffs that for $600 you can have a machine that will manufacture stuff to incredibly high standards of quality. And Prusa has one for $1,300 that would do almost anything that I can think of. There's also the resin based ones where you use like liquid resin,
which I have a lot of experience with because I do a lot of like miniature painting and stuff like that. The quality on that, like I don't have a nice machine, but I can get a detail quality at like 0.1 millimeters, which is absurd. Yeah. Like that's just a perfect object. Like it looks better than something that comes out of a factory.
I'm working on, because I love obscure niche things Like it's like this. Yes, I have a couple Glock 19s that as like a primary go-to gun, but everything else I have is like retardedly, niche. And
Some obscure interwar 32 ACP pistol.
yeah, but like I have a Charter Arms 44 special revolver, and it's the one with the concealed. It's the hammer shroud version, and I'm working with a guy in our thing who has a 3D scanner because I bought some boot grips for it from I think it was Hamry Forge, right? They're really nice grips, but they're not perfect for this because I want a higher grip, kind of like the UC grips that Lipsies did a run of like 442s with this really nice high grip because it's the concealed hammer model. So I want to replicate that. So he and I are working on this, and I'm like, I can sell these. And so if I'm going to do that, I'm going to get a resin printer because you just get a finer level of detail than a 3D printer, and speed and all this stuff if you're doing it in volume. But I was like, but wait, my niche thing, like maybe 50 people will buy this. Well, I instantly started getting these other ideas for variations that I think would sell quite well. And so I'm going to try it with my 3D printer because it works fine for like a nylon based one with glass impregnation or carbon fiber, and then I can also basically start a side business making these grips, and the cheap machine, which I've done all these mods to it to make it really stable, prints to a very high level of quality. Yes, I've printed some stuff with it, and it's a great idea, and I feel like this is the future because we have to like fend for ourselves because of the AI apocalypse that is being ushered in by the business world, where they're like, we're not going to hire you anymore because you're a white male, but also we're not going to hire you because we want to save money theoretically, and it's okay if we kind of tank the business over a 10-year period, but what really matters is our EBITDA numbers before I retire and cash out, because the early Xer bosses are crashing the system because they realized that they're in the middle of a bust out, and they're like, oh shit.
Yeah, well, I mean, you see that with the way that executives are compensated, where largely, obviously, there's direct compensation, but a lot of the real money is in indirect things like employee stock options. They basically get paid in company stock. And so you've created this system where the only thing that matters is stock values for exactly as long as it takes me to liquidate. And look, they're wise to that. They have like a vesting scheme where it'll take like 4 or 5 years for you to get all of it, even after you're done. But let's be honest, that creates a perverse incentive where the goal is not necessarily to, have a stable business long time, or over a long time rather, or to, maximize long-term profitability. It's to juice, what matters to me, right? The variables that matter for my purposes. And, yeah, you're going to see more and more of that. I was talking about this a little bit, and Sean Weiland may know more about this than I do, but you see a similar thing with while people are still employed with benefits plans, where there's a huge advantage to bringing on people for whom you do not have to have benefits, both directly because, health insurance and other things are extraordinarily expensive, but also because there are all of these different ratios that determine if a like benefits or compensation plan is legal, which means like, oh, you can't funnel, X percentage of money to the top 10% of workers. You have to spread it out more equally. Well, if you take 100 US workers and turn that into a executive team of 15 and like 1 or 2 shop managers, well, all of a sudden it becomes much easier to balance those ratios. You just jack up how much you and your buddies are getting paid without falling afoul of the law. So yeah, I mean, more and more of that stuff is going to happen. And I think it's interesting that you've already seen the proliferation of this technology in other conflicts, right? Like Brazil is a good example, but also what's going on in like Myanmar and stuff like that, or Burma, whatever we call it now, where like these technologies are out of the bag. You know,
Yeah.
guess what, bud? You live in a cyberpunk future where you literally can basically get a machine on Alibaba for $60 that will make you a gun. Yeah, what a time to be alive.
Sean Weiland commented that bamboo has political issues. China, but their P2S can do everything for less than 600 as an enclosed heated XY printer. 100% correct. There's cheaper ones out there, but the support isn't as good. There's some controls with bamboo. I don't understand a lot of this stuff like at a super deep level, but yeah, that's what you want if you're going to be printing nylon and stuff like that. What I would say is I learned a lot from getting a cheap ender, but I would not recommend it to anyone if you just want to start printing stuff. Just get a bamboo. I had to build an enclosure. I had to add bracing. I had to do all this stuff. If you just want to print stuff, just getting a bamboo, it's plug and play, and you will just spend a lot of money on filament because it will be printing all the time.
Yeah, it's and I think that people, the meme of some guy buying a 3D printer and then making like stupid desk toys is slightly true.
Yeah.
You know, that's what most people use it for. But like, if you're listening to this, you aren't most people. So like, if you're interested in getting stuff done, it's incredibly practical, even just as a, you know, prototyping. Like my brother-in-law, he'll oftentimes use his 3D printer because, you know, he'll design a model and it's like, oh, well, it'll take a ton of machine time, you know, which has an opportunity cost associated with it, but also, you know, it's messy, you know, it's more expensive. Or I can make a model, you know, print a, you know, not even a particularly high quality, you know, replica of it just to see like, oh,
yep,
is this roughly the right size?
Yeah.
Like, it's way more expensive to find out that you made it, you know, 10% too big for a human to hold, you know, after you've already made it in your final material, right? Made it all nice. It's like squirt some out, you know, of a 3D printer. And you're like, oh, well, now I can adjust. So I think that that's additionally something as well. I'm curious, and I have floated this idea. I have no idea if there's anything to it, but one of the things that I've wondered, as you know, metal sintering becomes, you know, more and more affordable, if the business model of manufacturing will change, or effectively you were paying for, you know, a design product and then shipping or, you know, sending that file to a local sort of manufactory, right, to actually have it made.
Yeah.
Because, you know, with a lot of these, you know, suppressor companies, that's basically what they do.
Correct.
They're a designer. They don't have the resources to purchase a, you know, a $500,000 machine to, you know, perform at the level they need it to.
Yes.
And so
Correct.
they basically are renting out shop time somewhere else. And so you assume like, okay, well, let's move that forward into the future. You know, maybe this becomes the same business model we already see with CNC shops, where there's a machine shop everywhere. And that exists so that someone is like, hey, you know, I have this thing, I need it made local. Can you do that? Blatant speculation, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see that.
Yeah, like Mr. Weiland is referring to that as well. He thinks we're, you know, what we need to do is move to cottage industry and Japanese mashikoba manufacturing. The general concept is local manufacturing. I honestly think that that's where things are going, and maybe this is because I read a lot of cyberpunk stuff, you know, as a teenager, but there's a lot of sound concepts in there where there's a lot of recycling that we can do to get raw materials here, like, and then, you know, reconstitute the material and then manufacture with it. Like, there's probably going to be in some areas, like in like, you know, smaller cities and larger cities, there's going to be a lot of opportunities, I think, for things along those lines. Instead of shipping everything to China, it's going to stop, like, a lot because of tariffs and a bunch of other stuff. It's going to stop making sense, as well as just fuel costs and whatever. Local manufacturing is going to be where it's at, just to save on a lot of those things. A huge amount of prototyping is being done in China, and then they mail the thing to you. Like, again, like you said, you send them the file, but then they steal the file. Whereas if you keep it locally in America, you know, that reduces that risk, and or at least it delays, you know, the time to market for competitors stealing it.
Yeah, and that's sort of one of my big complaints, right, is that okay, we started doing tariffs, but tariffs exist to fund domestic industry,
Yeah.
right, to get them to a place of parity, so that you don't have to just compete with the world. And it seems as if we've sort of gotten the worst of both worlds, right? Where it's like you're getting
Yeah.
tariffs and also uh, that we've just brought globalism here. Like we'll have shitty factories, polluting everything, but you won't get to work there either. But I think that what you're talking about, right, is I think that that is a likely future because again, right, like as history resumes and as politics becomes something that has actual consequences on the international stage, well, all of a sudden, you can't practice this sort of retardo globalism anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's just logical. And people I know in manufacturing are seeing the worm turn towards them, and they're feeling very confident. And it's not only because of Trump's tariffs and stuff. A lot of it is just economically, the model that we've been using doesn't work. And especially, like I said, the biggest issue, beyond the instability of shipping, like we learned a lot from COVID, right? uh if you're dependent upon, just in time delivery, and it involves oceans and foreign countries, like that leaves you very vulnerable. And so there's a lot of good point, Sean Weiland. We now have the Office of Strategic Capital making investments in reshoring manufacturing for military use. There's going to be a lot of military manufacturing coming back to the United States. People don't know this, but a huge part of military manufacturing companies in America are just assembling shit made overseas. Boeing manufactures the AH-64 Apache in Arizona. It was previously owned by whichever helicopter
Bell, I think, wasn't
yeah,
it?
yeah. They acquired Bell, and the airframes for the Apache are made in India.
I assume there's been no noticeable decline in quality.
Ugh.
Uh, yeah, and this is something that has actually come up. There have been leaks unsubstantiated from within Boeing that a lot of their recent uh, a lot of their recent troubles are due to the fact that they're effectively outsourcing components to places with much lower standards.
Oh yeah.
China, for example. So they were getting titanium from China that was not manufactured to the appropriate spec. That they bought what they thought was aircraft grade titanium, and really it's pot metal with like a oil skin finish on it. I don't know if that's exactly what happened, but something similar. And again, that becomes one of those things where it's like, look, like, are we a serious country? Like, are we just gonna keep doing that, or are we going to actually be a place that makes things even for our own benefit? Uh, yeah, there's a lot to be said on that. I've been interested to see, and I think he'll be on the show sooner or later. We're working on getting it set up, but Lucas Botkin's new company, launched very recently, and they don't have all their products out, but he's been talking a lot about the process of onshoring. Now, look, he primarily does like nylon goods, but one of the things he's been talking about is effectively that how absolutely preposterous it is to get materials. Where, for instance, like there's one company in the U.S. that manufactures nylon to certain specs,
Yeah.
and I say in the United States, it's in Puerto Rico, and they're so insanely backed up. We're talking like 2-year wait lists that they can just act like a cartel. Like, oh, our prices are up. Oh, we don't feel like doing that. And so all of a sudden, right, that business, depending on it, is screwed because they are manufacturing something that technically needs to be made in America. Even if we assume Puerto Rico is American enough for that to matter, right? It creates this kind of horribly perverse incentives. And so he's been talking about like, okay, like what do we actually do? Like, do we need a night like a factory to make nylon? Like, okay, that's a big thing to do. Maybe
Exactly.
it's something to be done. And so yeah, he has some pretty interesting opinions on that. You can find it on your own on YouTube. Just look up his name. But yeah, I think that if globalism really is dead, and it seems like it is, we're likely to see more of that. Now the question is, for whom does that benefit? Right? Like, is this going to be, what we've been complaining about, which is domestic labor or domestic, manufacturing with international labor, right? That doesn't really help us. But, there is an opportunity to make a correct move. We'll see if they actually get to it. But Karl, I realize you have to go. I don't want to keep you over time. So where can people find you, man?
You can see me yelling at clouds on X at Caudillo Dahl, or better yet, if you want to see podcasts and articles and stuff like that, check out my Substack, karldahl.substack.com. It has pretty much everything. Thanks for having me, Jay.
Happy to have you on. I also want to say big news. Styx Hexenhammer has been arrested.
Yay.
For a domestic dispute, which is kind of funny. I won't. Yeah, whatever. I'll gloat a little bit. It's kind of funny.
It's kind of funny.
A cultist libertarian goes to prison. We'll see how that goes for him. Anyway, dude, it's been a ton of fun to have you. Link to all your things down in the description. As far as my stuff, Jay Burden Show, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere you want to hear it. Karl, I appreciate it. Everyone at home, keep your head up. Life can't last forever. Good night.